Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying.
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com, coming to you on a Monday, October 14th. Hope everybody is having a wonderful day and what is definitely the longest week of the LA Galaxy season. No games over the weekend for the Galaxy. One important game that we were all watching that almost went the way of the LA Galaxy there. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also get you ready for the game Decision Day coming up on the 19th, this Saturday. The LA Galaxy, along with the entire Western Conference, kicking off at 6 p.m. Pacific time to decide who's going to be first in the Western Conference. So that's going on. There's a suspension that we have to talk about. There's some awards or some accolades that have been given out that we need to talk about. And in general, we need to get you ready for what is coming for Decision Day and how that sort of goes. Kevin is, I believe, traveling back right now to his house. I don't think we're going to get him tonight, and I decided to do a quick show tonight instead of waiting for tomorrow. But I am certainly glad that you guys are here. It's going to be an interesting day/week for all of us, waiting for the LA Galaxy to return to the soccer field after the international break over the weekend. Just 4 teams playing, 2 games in total. It was Columbus and New England. It was Vancouver hosting LAFC. In fact, both games, interesting enough, if we're not paying attention, and I think maybe there has been a little bit of focus, too much focus on the Western Conference and not enough of paying attention to what is going on the Eastern side of things too. So there are things over there that I think as Galaxy fans you need to watch as well. So I hope everybody's doing well. I know we weren't on Thursday. It feels like it's a long time since we've gotten back here. We just wanted to do a quick show to sort of get you prepped for the rest of this week, because the rest of the week is going to be weird, right? We know the LA Galaxy have been training. We are expecting that Marco Royce will be back. We're expecting an update on Joseph Paintsil. Then the LA Galaxy will travel to Houston. We know they're playing Houston. We sort of know all the parameters around what needs to happen on Saturday and how it can all go well or go sideways. So those things are sort of all there. And it feels like this last, the last 4 games of this season are just dragging. It's like you want the Galaxy out there playing games. You want everybody doing well. Certainly, I think the Galaxy could have handled an international break game better than a lot of teams, because certainly if you watched any of the Vancouver LAFC game, you could see there were a whole bunch of people missing for both teams, and the quality showed it. I'm going to be pausing tonight to drink water, too, just giving you a heads up. Whenever I'm solo, you got to put up with that a little bit. But no, just a lot of weird things going on in the league. And watching that game, if you watch the Vancouver and LAFC game, I think you'll all know that the Galaxy were about 2 minutes from clinching the Western Conference until Vancouver gave up a counterattack and then went ahead and allowed LAFC back into that game. So LAFC wins that 2-1. That now means, and let's get it straight up to the point, the LA Galaxy need to find a point somewhere. There's other ways for it to happen if the Galaxy do lose the game, if LAFC does win the game, and then you have to go to tiebreakers and all that fun stuff. We can talk about that here in a little bit. But basically, the Galaxy are looking for a point whenever they go away to Houston. Before we get too crazy and heading in that direction, I did want to talk about some of the things that we've seen that passed through last week, and probably you saw, and maybe it's something you wanted to talk about, maybe it wasn't. But Jalen Neal, Julian Aude, both named to the 22 under 22. Number 9 for Jalen Neal, well deserved for him. I know there's some people who certainly, especially one guy on Reddit who just hates Jalen Neal. Good Lord. Even in a place that normally embraces just the absolute crap posting that happens sometimes. Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, they're all the same. Even those guys are like, man, I think somebody really hates Jalen Neal, like you can tell. But Jalen Neal, number 9 in that. I expect he'll jump up in that category, just in terms of his presence on the team next year as well. I mean, you talk about a guy who started most of the games for the LA Galaxy, Jalen Neal, who was a solid starter until the very end there whenever Amiro Garces comes in. And Jalen Neal is still expected to be a big part of this team going forward. I don't think anybody's talking about him, sort of falling to the wayside or anything else. Jalen Neal, number 9 out of the 22 under 22. Julian Aude, who didn't get to play a whole bunch, especially not the second half of the season, but who was at one point, I think, a defender of the year for the LA Galaxy, certainly. A defender of the year candidate, was one of the better defenders, could get into the offensive zone. I think the Galaxy have missed some of his dynamism. One of the things you're going to see, I think, in this, in the playoffs and coming forward is somebody like Julian Aude coming in and being a difference maker. You've had John Nelson. By the way, we don't want to shrug out John Nelson. This is just about being under 22 and where you're ranked in the league. But whenever you look at what the LA Galaxy have, they have 2 young players. They're coming into their own. I think Julian Aude could be a huge part of what the LA Galaxy do in the playoffs and then into next season. So looking at that 16th ranked, I think he's going to be much more important next year in terms of the league as well. The Galaxy catching some of these guys on the upswing, right? Certainly Jalen Neal, certainly in Julian Aude. You look at, and maybe the upswing is too broad of a term, but you look at somebody like John Nelson and just getting the most out of guys like John Nelson as well. Getting the most out of guys like Edwin Cerrillo, who is going to be a star in this league. He's never going to be that, oh my God, everybody wants a Cerrillo kit. Although, if you're a fan of this podcast, I feel like you'd want a Cerrillo kit, and you should. The kid is, he's got some of that dog in him for sure, but he is calm, composed. He's such an addition to everything. But the Galaxy catching some of these guys on the way up, right? So getting the swing out of it. Even Dejan Jovalic, you look at him, getting the swing out of him, swing on that upswing, catching those guys. This is important to what the LA Galaxy do. This is important to how they have success, and it's about building that depth and doing everything that is out there. Some super chats. Mark, your first super chat, we certainly appreciate it. If YouTube is correct. Sometimes it gets it completely wrong. But a $10 super chat. Mark, we certainly appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your first super chat there. Eric, a $5 super chat in there as well. You are awesome, Eric. We appreciate you. Appreciate the super chat, 100%. And then Gary, always a staple here in the corner of the Galaxy chat room. Gary, $2 super chat. No water, only Dr. Pepper. I'll be honest. Trust me, my love for Dr. Pepper knows no bounds. Have you seen on like the TikTok shop where they have a little ghost and they're holding like a Dr. Pepper, a Diet Coke or a Dr. Pepper or something like that? And I think they're mostly marketing those towards like women who are like, oh, I love my Diet Coke. It's sort of like a thing. Well, they have the Dr. Pepper one. I have thought about buying that sweatshirt. I don't know. That's just saying, between you and me, if we're not telling anybody else, I have thought about that. Recently, by the way, my wife can vouch for this. I've also decided that, the TikTok dances where the girls do the TikTok dances, I said, sometimes I wish I could move like that. And then she said, well, my wife, who was a dancer growing up, in ballet and, pop and I think on the dance team in some college, in college as well, not some college, I know which college, but, going through there as well, she can dance. Right. And so then she goes, okay, well, show me what you got. And I attempted to dance, by the way, tip of the hat to the Hammer, because if you've ever seen him do some TikTok dances, dude could flat out like lay it down. Like there's no embarrassment there. That is solid. That is acceptable. My wife said, if I ever do what I did to show her how I could dance, that I am never ever allowed out of the house again. Right. So that's it. I just wanted to point that out. I don't know why. I just thought that was important for y'all to know. Now that you know that, I hope that you can accept me with everything we're doing. So, no, we talk about Julian Aude. We talk about Jalen Neal. Certainly those guys in there. I mean, just going across, I was just perusing because I was like, there's some important things that you have to talk about here whenever you're talking about the LA Galaxy. And sometimes I think we don't focus wide enough. We get sort of, especially on this podcast, and it's a my fault, right? It's one of those things where it's sort of like, oh, well, this is my fault. I'm in charge of the podcast. I could make it wider. Just looking at what the LA Galaxy did, and we've talked about it, but Dejan Jovalic, Gabriel Peck, Ricky Puig, Joseph Paintsel. when you go and look at the stats, when you go and look at what they've been able to do, 27 games played is the low end for Dejan Jovalic. 22 games started is the low end, and that's for Dejan Jovalic. We've talked about the DPs and everything they've done, but you were talking about goal contributions, 21 from Dejan Jovalic. Gabriel Peck, 29. Ricky Puig, 28. Joseph Paintsel, 20. We have looked at this. 15 goals for Jovalic, 15 goals for Peck. You have 13 goals for Ricky Puig, and don't put it by him to score 2 against Houston in order to get him into 15. And that would put him 15 goals and 15 assists on that. Plus, if Ricky's going to be out there, then I think you can expect some assists as well. But just looking at what the LA Galaxy were able to do, and credit to Will Kuntz, credit to Greg Vanney, and credit to everything that they tried to do, you can take away some of the LA Galaxy's individuals, right? And we've seen that with Ricky Puig sometimes, where you take away what he's able to do in the middle, and then, Gabriel Peck will beat you. You can try to take away Gabriel Peck, but then Ricky Puig is going to beat you. By the way, you can try to take away those things. That doesn't necessarily happen. What's seeing what to do? Joseph Paintsel has been sort of a shell of himself in the second half, and certainly after injury with all the games. I think this is speculation, but it is. I would expect that there's some homesickness there, some adjustments to Los Angeles. There's everything that's sort of weighing on him a little bit. But even with Joseph Paintsel not being quote unquote his best, the dude has 20 goal contributions, 10 goals, 10 assists. That's impressive. And when we look at whether the LA Galaxy are really contenders, when we look at what the LA Galaxy can do, go back to this, because you can do this, and then, Fagundes drops in there with another 4 goals, right? And you sort of get some of the bit players that are coming in here doing their thing as well. The fact is, the LA Galaxy have a multifaceted attack. They have one that is difficult to corner, even when you lose a piece, which could be the case with Joseph Paintsel, right? Waiting on injury updates for him. We'll expect, I believe, although I haven't seen a schedule go out for the Galaxy yet, but I believe we'll get a schedule tomorrow, and that will say that on Thursday there will be a press conference, right? So I'll be able to hop on that. So this is what you're able to do whenever you have the ability to slot guys in, because you could put Diego Fagundes in for Peck, or you can put him in for Paintsel, or quite honestly, you could put him in for Jovalic. However you want to do that, you can do that. And if you do that, I think you're going to find that the LA Galaxy are much harder to stop. And whenever you have somebody like Ricky Puig, a raw, energetic talent who has been able to do things that, quite honestly, I don't know that I've seen too much of in this league, you're too close to it. I'm going to tell everybody right now, you're too close to it. And this includes all the reporters that are going to vote Gabriel Peck for Player of the Year for the LA Galaxy. I get it. But you're too close to it. You've forgotten the wonder. You've forgotten the amazement that Ricky Puig is able to provide. And even if I don't agree with some of his tactics sometimes, whether that's on the field or off the field, you have to understand that Ricky Puig is by far the most talented player on this team. It is not close. Gabriel Peck is the second guy who is the second most talented on this team, but you're talking like a full Ricky away from what Ricky Puig is able to do. The Galaxy have a little dynamo, and don't mean to say that on a week where they're going to play Houston, but they have a dynamo in what Ricky Puig is, what he provides, and what he's able to do. And I don't think that going into the playoffs, that's not a place where I see Ricky Puig shying away from things. That's not a place where I see Gabriel Peck running away from things. This whole season has felt like a gauntlet for this LA Galaxy team, which is why most of the people, most of the fans are still waiting for them to collapse, right? You're waiting for that shoe to drop. Some really interesting reactions on Twitter to the LA Galaxy not clinching whenever LAFC was 2 minutes from basically getting that second spot and the Galaxy getting the first spot. I thought the really interesting one was, Josh, you post a lot about the fact that this LA Galaxy team is one of the best, but if they fall to second in the last day, that's really going to hurt. And I said, no, only to the perception, not to the stats. The stats tell you that this LA Galaxy team is among the best that has ever played. And even if they don't win, even if they drop to second is a standing. Right? It's not a stat. So we can look at this and objectively look at this LA Galaxy team and say they didn't play in a weak Western Conference. In fact, they actually ended up playing in what I think is a higher median conference than what the East is. The East is top heavy. The West is certainly has a higher floor than the East, right? And you can go look at some of the things that you've seen from the Eastern Conference and the teams that are in there. But when you look at what this LA Galaxy team has accomplished, when you look at what they've been able to do, the stats tell you this is one of the best LA Galaxy teams to have ever played. It doesn't matter if they win or lose. Obviously, the winning only makes them that much better. But even if it ends right where it is, the soccer that they played, the results that they got, the things that they were able to do in 2024 is among the best in history. It's like they're an underrated team. So I know in 4 or 5 years, we're going to look back at this 2024 team because I've had this sort of look at it before. Whenever you had like a 2014 team, which won an MLS Cup, and you're like, oh man, how could they be underrated? That team was so good that the results weren't always great at the beginning of the year, but they got good. And when they did, that team was amongst the best, right? So there's always perspective gained whenever you can step away from it. We're too close to Ricky Puig to be able to see exactly what he's able to do with this LA Galaxy team. We're underappreciating what he's able to do. And two is this LA Galaxy team, regardless of what happens on Saturday, is amongst the best that we have ever witnessed. And stop and think about that. 2010, I still remember 2010 as one of the best teams ever to play the game. They got eliminated by Dallas, right? In a game that what was it, like a 6-2 game at Home Depot Center back then? Just absolutely got blown out. Playoffs done. Everything done. Season ends a crash. They won the Supporters Shield in 2010. They did all these things. I can still tell you that was amongst one of the best teams I've ever watched as an LA Galaxy. So I think you're going to see that this will last, that the 2024 team is going to last regardless of what happens on Saturday. This isn't to downplay what happens on Saturday. By the way, only fitting that the LA Galaxy will have to play in order to actually clinch that first place in the Western Conference. If you've looked at everything that they've done so far this year, it has been the hard way, more than likely, right? It hasn't been easy. If you've been watching this, hasn't been easy. Look at the very first game, the LA Galaxy beating in Miami. Miami gets a phantom second yellow on Mark Delgado, and Mark Delgado gets a red card, and Messi and co end up coming from behind in the, 8th minute of stoppage or some stupid number like that, and get a point. That point, those 2 points the LA Galaxy lost there are the difference right now. The flopopotamus that happened against LAFC at LAFC, that's a point the LA Galaxy could have right now. You could also point to all of the losses and say, hey, if you just would have beat Chicago. I'm telling you, and I know people don't like to hear this, you're going to lose games. This isn't the EPL, all right? You're going to lose games, and when you lose games, that's going to happen. I think you can look more at the times when the Galaxy were unfairly punished across the time to sort of look at what those are the points that I feel like you could really do with those points right now. Speaking of Mark Delgado, we do have to update on that because the MLS Disciplinary Committee did come down with a decision, and gee, what do you know? Big surprise. The Disco has basically suspended Mark Delgado for one game. He'll serve as one match suspension against the Houston Dynamo. This is for that tackle that he committed in the 60th minute of the Galaxy's match against Austin FC on October 5th. By the way, when I saw that live, I thought it was a yellow card. Having watched it back through, I still think it's a yellow card. And I think this is MLS simply placating a certain portion of the people who watched that game and wanted it to be a little more even. They're like, well, if Biro gets a red card at the end, then Delgado should have gotten one in the 60th minute. Those two tackles are unequal in my mind, and I stay by. I've told you, you remember when Jovalic, whenever they called the penalty for Jovalic in that game, and I was like, oh, and I looked at the replay, I'm like, oh, no, definitely not. I go, it's coming back. I can be honest. I'm going to be honest with you, 100%. But it is, that to me is just, yeah, it's a hard yellow card. Is it borderline? It could be, but even whenever you look at that, he's lifting legs up. He's not trying to trap. He's not trying to injure. He's not trying to do any of those things. It's tactical fouls. He's going by. And he catches them. And, Biro can be upset, or whoever was up there can be as upset as they want to be. And that whole sequence there was poorly handled. And the fact is that the disciplinary committee missed a headbutt that John Nelson got on the other side. John Nelson was bleeding during that altercation. Apparently, there aren't enough cameras. I have no idea what that is all about. But disciplinary committee is going to come in and they're going to suspend Mark Delgado for that. There's also some fines for mass confrontation. There's Biro got an undisclosed amount for failing to leave. Biro, who leveled Ricky Puig, who lined him up and leveled him basically when the game was over and Ricky was almost out of bounds, got no additional games, which in any sane world, I think you would figure is at least one additional game. So it's one of those things. The Galaxy now have to go to Houston and likely going to be without Joseph Paintsel. That's my guess right now. I do not have any inside information. I just want to make it clear because sometimes some of these Instagram accounts like to quote me. I don't have any inside information, just seeing how he went down, seeing what he was holding. I don't expect Joseph Paintsel to be ready for this game against Houston, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up missing the playoffs. That's me. That's my guess. I have no inside information whatsoever. We could find out on Thursday that, you know what, it's not too bad. He's going to take this weekend off. He'll be ready for the playoffs. Certainly the case, much like Marco Royce, who we are expecting to be available for Houston, right? Okay. Very good. So that's the Mark Delgado news there. The other thing that we're all waiting for, and I know people were even asking this. In fact, was that a super chat? I think it was a super chat in there. Yeah, Tim, a $5 super chat. Hey, Josh, when do you think will tell us the round one playoff times and dates, specifically game one? Thanks, can't wait. You're not going to hear until Saturday. I imagine you'll hear right after Saturday. Somebody asked, are they just waiting on seeding to make this? And I don't think that's the case. I can tell you right now that because I happen to know that there is a concert being played at BMO during the window for the third game of the that first round. There's a concert out on the field there. And I know that they can't play on one of the dates because my wife is actually, I think, going to that concert, and I am either going to a Galaxy game that night, which could be the Galaxy game, or I'm going to go and make sure to drop her off. So whenever you say that, there's other things to decide, and there's other things you have to schedule around besides just the seating. So it's not just seating. It's going to be about venue availability as well. So there's going to be things that are planned out. We're hearing that the Galaxy play either that Saturday or Sunday. That's what it seems like. Miami's going to get that first game on Friday. They want that to be a standalone. The playoffs start now. Here's Miami. Here's Lionel Messi. Everybody watch it, right? That's going to be the big one. And then it'll start on Saturday, where I imagine there'll be, 2 or possibly 3 games on Saturday and maybe 2 or 3 games on Sunday. That's probably too many games. I haven't done my math yet. But regardless of that fact, that's what we're waiting. So there's not just, hey, what are the seeding? Although that does play, I think, some into it. Regardless, they're going to try and get those games going as soon as possible. Right now, I'm still thinking like Saturday. The ideal thing that you'd love is like a Saturday at 6, perhaps. Remember, these are going to be more TV centered, I believe, and so they're going to want an East Coast, 9 or whatever it is, to be a West Coast 6. So I wouldn't be surprised if the games are a little earlier. You could even get some afternoon games. We are into playoff soccer, by the way. And remember, that first round is a round of 3. So the dates coming up, and we all know decision day is Saturday, October 19th. Excuse me. Saturday, October 19th. And that Saturday, October 19th is a day where every team will play. Except for Toronto, who has already ended their season, already eliminated from the Eastern Conference. I can show you the standings there in a second, just so you can get it. Then there's the wild card matches, all right? The wild card matches are the 8 and 9s in each conference. So 8 and 9 will play, and then 8 and 9 will then, whoever the winner of that is, will go into the first. They will play that first seed, right? So you're going to have them already have played a game, and so they're going to end up playing, 4 games in the span of pretty short time, and then the other team will only have to play those first 3 games. And again, best of 3 to start, which is stupid, and MLS knows it's stupid, and it just keeps doubling down. Some of the stuff, the crap they write about this is all the best of 3 is more exciting. No, nobody thinks it's more exciting. Nobody likes it. Everybody likes home and away. Everybody's ready for home and away. Go back to home and away. Keep everything the same, just make it home and away. All right, and then let's go. Let's actually do this. By the way, eliminate, it should be 7 and 6 playing for the wild card, and everything else is underneath that. That's my uneducated take. Let's look at the standings. So you can see it, by the way, just in case you're wondering. December 7th is MLS Cup. And we have to watch some of the games in the East to understand where the LA Galaxy could possibly play MLS Cup should they make it. And let's dream big whenever we talk about this anyway, right? So Miami currently almost ready to set that points record. A win on their last game would give them 74 points, and that would set a new points record for a season. As it stands right now, the LA Galaxy sit just at 64 points. So about 5, 6, 7, what is it, 7? 7 points away from Miami and what they're doing. Miami historically going to have a great season if they can win that last game. I'll look up the schedule here in a second. We can look who they're playing. I forget off the top of my head. But that's Miami. Columbus at 63. Remember, I said the LA Galaxy are 64. I said at the beginning of this, we have been, and again, I think my fault. I have to open it up, make everything nice and wide, right? We have to open this up. We have to pay attention to what's going on in the East as well, because if the LA Galaxy were to host MLS Cup, right now the only team that would host MLS Cup if the LA Galaxy were in it would be Miami, and it would be Miami versus LA Galaxy in Miami. Other than that, as things stand right now, the LA Galaxy would host any other Eastern Conference opponent. However, that being said, Columbus, who just beat New England 4-0 over the weekend, they are only 1 point behind the LA Galaxy. And by the way, everybody's on 33 games. Every single team is on 33 games, except for one, which is Toronto. And again, we've already looked at them. You can see them with a little E there, eliminated. They have 34 games. They're the only one that has had that extra game. So their season is done and written off there. We go over to the Western Conference, and it's the LA Galaxy at 64, LAFC 3 points behind at 61, Seattle at 56, Salt Lake at 56. You have Houston at 51. You don't think that Houston wants to make sure that Colorado doesn't bump or jump over them? 5 is probably a better seeding for them than the 6th. You have Minnesota in there as well. So Houston has stuff to play for. Do they have as much to play for as the LA Galaxy? Maybe not. And maybe that's a peek into what the LA Galaxy could possibly be looking at. But with the seeding, there are no other teams in the playoffs. We know every team in the Western Conference that is in the playoffs. It is the Galaxy, it's LAFC, it's Seattle, Salt Lake, Houston, Colorado, Minnesota, Vancouver, and Portland. That being said, we don't know the seeding of all of them. As it stands right now, we can even go over to it. As it stands right now, the LA Galaxy would host the winner of the wild card, 8 and 9. That is Vancouver. Vancouver would host Portland. As it stands right now, you would have the number 4 Real Salt Lake hosting the number 5 in the Houston Dynamo. Real Salt Lake probably likes that matchup, I would imagine. You have number 3, Seattle. By the way, when did Seattle become 3? How did they sneak up there? You have number 3, Seattle, over number 6, Colorado, and you have number 2, LAFC, over number 7, Minnesota. Now, if you want to play the what-if game, should the LA Galaxy somehow lose a game and LAFC win a game, and then it goes to tiebreakers and LAFC win on the tiebreakers? If that would happen, and we'll go over the tie-breaking stuff here in a second, if that would happen, the Galaxy would fall into that second. Somebody on Twitter was like, it would just ruin everything. I'm like, perspective is that the LA Galaxy would finish in second place in the Western Conference, and still only LAFC would basically, they'd have to go to LAFC for that Western Conference final. It's not what you want to do. In a perfect world, you win the game in Houston, so you don't have to go to LAFC in the Western Conference final. You make them come to your house. Those things are important. That could be the difference maker. If something goes awry, that could be the reason. That being said, not the end of the world. Still get a chance to win on the road. And make it to the Western Conference Finals as well, right? So that's something to sort of pay attention to. But one of the things that we're still watching is that Columbus side. Let's go to the Supporter Shield standings. So Miami is first. The LA Galaxy are second. Columbus is third. If you're the LA Galaxy, you want to match whatever Columbus does. All right? If Columbus gets a draw, you want to draw. If Columbus gets a win, you want to win. If Columbus gets a loss, you don't want to do anything like Columbus does, and then you have to worry about LAFC. I would argue it's almost as important for the Galaxy to stay above Columbus as it is for the Galaxy to stay above LAFC, just success-wise. That is an MLS Cup routing there that we're paying attention to, but I think it's an important one when we look at everything. I'm going to take a break here. I'm going to drink some water. Give me a second. So that's what we see whenever we look at this, right? We have Columbus at 63. We have LAFC at 61. Both of those able to go to 66. The Galaxy able to go to 67. A win would basically move LAFC to that second spot. The LA Galaxy would get to keep that first spot in the West, clinch it, play the wild card winner, and would be the hosts to Columbus should Columbus. And I think a likelihood, it's either Columbus or Miami are probably my two tops in that Eastern Conference. A likelihood that if you make it to MLS Cup, you would host Columbus instead of having to go to Columbus. Those things matter. The Galaxy do very well at home in MLS Cups, for sure. One of the things that we've sort of been paying attention to as well is that just where the LA Galaxy have been. And I think people sort of mentioned, hey, what do we what has this LA Galaxy team done? I went through it on my chart, and my chart's a little different than what the league keeps because I only do it for LA Galaxy game weeks. So there could have been a little fluctuation in there, but I'm close enough. It's for the Galaxy game weeks. I pay attention to it. The LA Galaxy have spent 12 weeks at number 1. If you want to talk about number 1 or number 2, the LA Galaxy have been in second place or better for 18 weeks of the season. If you want to talk about third or better, the LA Galaxy have spent 28 weeks at third or better. So certainly falling to second is still very much within that, but the LA Galaxy has spent more time basically than any other place in first place this year in the Western Conference. It would be disappointing, I think, for everybody should they fall down on that, right? So that's something to sort of pay attention to. And then it's all about seeding in the West. There are still legitimate playoff races happening on the Eastern Conference side. And again, if I can go back to the Eastern Conference graphics, we can see that DC isn't locked in, Montreal isn't locked in, Philadelphia isn't locked in, and Atlanta isn't locked in. There are 4 teams vying for 2 spots. Go over to the Western Conference. There are no more spots available. All the spots have been filled. It's all about the dance for which position and where you need to be, right? So that's what we see whenever we look at the LA Galaxy and what they're able to do. Again, just to give you an idea of what those clinching areas for the LA Galaxy are. And let's be crystal clear about it, so that way everybody understands where we're at. The Galaxy clinches the number 1 seed in the Western Conference with an LA Galaxy win or draw at Houston. Okay, that's easy. That one's easy. Or an LAFC loss or draw versus San Jose. Less likely, but okay. Or the LA Galaxy advantage in tiebreakers over LAFC. Here are, and let's bring up the Western Conference so that we can compare these. Here are the tiebreakers right now. Should LAFC win and the LA Galaxy lose, they would be tied on wins at 19. Depending on the goal differential, right now it's +2 to the LA Galaxy, minus basically, it's +20 for the LA Galaxy, +18, so there's a 2-goal differential there. Depending on how the LA Galaxy lose, depending on how LAFC win, if the Galaxy lose 1-0 and LAFC win 1-0, that would tie them on goal differential as well. And so that could also be the deciding factor. How you win or how you lose could be a huge difference in what happens at the very top, because that could be a tiebreaker. And then it's goals for. And this is the one where the Galaxy feel a lot better, right? They have 8+ goals. So they would probably, if it came down to tied for total number of wins, tied for goal differential, the Galaxy would likely win that tiebreaker on goals for. If LAFC win and the Galaxy lose, we're into tiebreakers. Okay? So that's something to watch here as we look at it, okay? That's what is coming up for the LA Galaxy. That's the seeding part of all of this. And again, I've sort of looked at some of the choices, and because we don't really know how the West is going to shake out, because there's still some things that could sort of change around a little bit, especially with Minnesota being 1 point from Colorado, who's 1 point from Houston, 2 point. Vancouver's just 2 points from Minnesota. Depending on the results that happen here, you could really change a lot of who you're going to face. So yes, we can look at if the playoffs started now and said the LA Galaxy would face the winner of Vancouver and Portland. That could all change whenever it happens on Saturday. 100% could all change. So something to watch there. Saturday, October 19th, here's your Eastern Conference matchups, right? Eastern Conference starts at 3 p.m. Pacific time. The Western Conference starts at 6 p.m. Pacific time. All the games kick off at the same time. Okay? So Chicago, Nashville, nobody cares. DC, Charlotte, people will be watching that one. Miami, New England, that's the one. New England. New England just got beat 4-0 by Columbus. Out of the international break now, Miami is in. Miami will take on New England. It feels like, especially with Miami being at home, feels like Miami has a very good chance of setting that new points record. Montreal is hosting New York City. New York Red Bulls versus Columbus. Again, watch that Columbus game. That's actually a good game for the Galaxy. New York has not. The Red Bulls have not been playing great, but going against Columbus, this one could be an interesting one to sit or look at. And, New York Red Bulls are right on the cusp of that line. Columbus, I can't fall any further than second and can't catch first. So Columbus may be relaxing on this particular day, which won't be bad unless they also realized, because I'm sure their coaches aren't smart enough, right? Wilfred Nancy, one of the smartest coaches, best coaches in Major League Soccer, he doesn't also realize that they're playing for an MLS Cup hosting rights. So looking at that, those are your Eastern Conference matchups. But watch that Columbus game. You get to watch it at 3 p.m. So 3 hours before the LA Galaxy kick off. Then you get into the Western Conference. It's Austin hosting Colorado. It's Dallas hosting Kansas City. It's Houston hosting the LA Galaxy. Then you have LAFC hosting San Jose. You have Minnesota hosting St. Louis. It's Vancouver visiting Salt Lake, and then it's Seattle and Portland. Seattle hosting Portland for the ending match there. That's an interesting to watch, Seattle versus Portland. Looking at a Cascadia Cup up there in the Pacific Northwest is the last game, and Seattle very much in that third spot, fighting it out with Real Salt Lake. So they're going to want to make sure they win and stay in that third spot instead of dropping to the fourth, right? So all those things to sort of watch and pay attention to. By the way, Adam, $2 super chat. I was rooting for Vancouver. They couldn't hold on. I don't want to call out the Hammer, but there was a counterattack and a shot by LAFC with about 3 minutes to go, and it missed. And Hammer texted me. He goes, "That was it. That was the one." Because he said he was sure there was going to be one more chance from LAFC. And I wrote back, I think I was almost like, "Hey, a little early there, bud." And then before I could even do that, LAFC scored to make that game a 2-1. The sad thing about that, Adam, of course, if you watch that game, and if you watch most of it like I did, you saw that Vancouver left like 3 or 4 goals on the table, and they hit the post twice. Not to mention they hit the upright almost 30 seconds after LAFC scored that game. It was almost 2-2. Brian White went off the upright, and I think he had another one that went off the crossbar earlier. So, hey, you can't trust Canadians. That was basically the moral of that story. I'm joking, but it's a good joke, and I still enjoy it. Don't trust people to do your job for you. Go out there if you're the LA Galaxy and have a purpose. Play this. Show that you are the dominant team in the Western Conference. Go out there and beat a Houston team who, quite honestly, needs beat at this particular point. And if you do that and you control your destiny there, by the way, you want to be in a winning position towards the end of this game. You don't want to be chasing. Be in a winning position towards this game, because a draw works almost as good as a win. As a matter of fact, it works just as good as a win in this particular case. So put yourself in a winning position, score first, do all those fun things. Victor, by the way, $9.16 super chat says, "What do you expect Neil and Aude's roles to be in the playoffs?" They have to be ready to come in, especially Aude. I think Aude is going to get a lot more playing time than you expect, especially in the second half of games and that type of thing. So don't count them out. 100% don't count them out, because I really feel like this LA Galaxy team is a good one, that they're deep and they're not afraid to throw those guys like Aude, like Neil, like some of the other guys they have around. They could make this happen. Right? There's going to be a surprise in the playoff. There's going to be a player who steps up. Maybe that's a Fagundes. Maybe it wouldn't be so much a surprise, but watch him perform in the playoffs. So it'll be one of those things. Adam, $5 super chat. Josh, is it me, or has LAFC always had an easy schedule to close out the season since they've come into the league compared to the Galaxy? Hey, Adam, if you're a good team, you always have easy schedules. We talked a lot about that whenever the LA Galaxy were a bad team and always had tough schedules. Gary, by the way, $5 super chat. When they finally make a movie about the life and career of Landon Donovan, who plays him? My pick, Walton Goggins. One is, I don't know. You're putting me on the spot, Gary, and I really need time to think about this. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, like hairline, height, physical. You can't have somebody who looks like they can't play soccer playing it. You need somebody who's actually athletic, right? So it's important for that. So, yeah, one of those. But no, I appreciate the super chat, certainly. So Gary, always doing a good job there. But this is where you're at with all these things. One other update, I think, before I will get out of here, because I'm not sure we have too much stuff to talk about. Regardless, I'm just tossing papers around here. Don't worry about it. I wanted to give you, obviously, Dejan Jovalic away with Serbia in the national team. With the national team there, they're in the UEFA Nations League. Serbia did beat Switzerland, who was in last place in Group A4 in the UEFA Nations League. But they beat them 2-0. Dejan Jovalic didn't come off the bench. They next play tomorrow or Tuesday. And that one's away to Spain. Spain is currently top of the group there. Spain has 7 points from 3 games played. Denmark, who is in second, has 6 points from 3 games played. And then it's Serbia, who's in third, who have 4 points from 3 games played. But now they're going to play at Spain. I wouldn't suggest that would be one where you would expect the the Serbians to get the win, but always interesting to watch. If you get a chance, I think you can watch that tomorrow, so check it out. But Dejan Jovalic didn't play in the first game. Interesting to see if he does play against Spain, and then he would return to the LA Galaxy ahead of the Galaxy's match coming up against Houston on Saturday. So, $5 super chat from Adam. If Galaxy can score first in Houston, I believe they can get a good, fair result. But that is the LA Galaxy. If they score first, they are almost guaranteed a good result. They've only had one time the entire year, when they went away to Chicago, by the way, where they scored first and then and then lost the game. The Galaxy score first, they're almost guaranteed. But I'll tell you right now, Ben Olsen in Houston, not a team that you can roll over on. Tough team to play. The Galaxy would do really good to avoid them in the playoffs as much as they can. But still, looking at where the teams the LA Galaxy sort of could play, looking at that Houston team, look at RSL. I think that they actually play against RSL pretty well. Wouldn't be overly concerned with that. Looking at how they match up against Colorado, don't love it, but I also think the Galaxy showed a lot in that way win. I think they're markedly better than Colorado. Seattle, that would be a nice grudge match, but you'd always like it if you are playing them at home. The Galaxy have the ability basically to play every team in the Western Conference at home, except for the one game that they have to go for the best of three. But every game at home is available for the LA Galaxy in the Western Conference, as long as they take care of business against Houston. Again, that game coming up at 6 p.m. Pacific time. All the Western Conference games start at the very exact same time. You get to watch the Eastern Conference stuff a little bit before that. So I think that's what we have. I don't want to go too much. It's a weird week, right? And it feels weird because there were no games. It feels weird because everything's like sort of drawn out and prolonged. I mean, this is MLS to a T right now, taking all of this playoff. And by the way, do you remember last year whenever you were an LA Galaxy fan and they didn't make the playoffs and you're sort of sitting there going, are the playoffs even still on anymore? The fact that the regular season isn't over with is sort of head scratching too. So that's sort of where we're at. Adam, $2 super chat. Josh, when is media availability? When do they fly? So we don't know yet. We anticipate usually media availability is match day -2, which will put it on Thursday. So we anticipate it's going to be on Thursday, and it is likely that the LA Galaxy fly out possibly Friday afternoon. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do training on Friday afternoon or Friday morning in the AM and then fly out Friday afternoon. Could also possibly fly out, I guess, day of, but I don't think they're going to do that. So I'm guessing it's going to be a Friday afternoon release. The schedule should actually come out tomorrow. So if you're on Twitter or Threads, I will try to get you up to date on when that media availability is and when the LA Galaxy will be traveling. All right, LA Galaxy, this is it. Boys and girls, this is for all the marbles. You have to play for something on Saturday. It could be that the Galaxy could have shut it down this weekend, didn't have to worry about anything. But LAFC, stingy as they always are, and Ilya Sanchez scoring with about 2 minutes left in their match. In stoppage time already in order to take the win against Vancouver. So LAFC didn't drop the points that you thought they were going to drop in that particular game, although they were so close to doing it. And now they will go into the last weekend, getting to play San Jose, the LA Galaxy getting to play against Houston. And should the LA Galaxy get a point, or should LAFC not win that game, the LA Galaxy will win that Western Conference first place spot. All right. I think that does it. We will have a full show on Thursday. I'm sure the Hammer's getting all up and lubricated, ready to go for that. We can get you ready for that game coming up on Saturday evening, 6 p.m. night or evening. It feels like evening, but it is getting darker earlier. Maybe it's night. It's at 6 p.m. on Saturday night. The LA Galaxy hosting traveling away to the Houston Dynamo. So that's what we got. All right. I think that does it. If you're looking for me on Twitter, it's at Jay Guesman, at Galaxy Podcast. Head on over to cornerofthegalaxy.com. Certainly appreciate you checking me out. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter, who's traveling today, at KBaxter11. And, of course, LATimes.com for all of this wonderful stuff. LA Galaxy, the longest week. That's what this is going to be known as. The longest week. The LA Galaxy getting ready to travel to Houston for the Decision Day game that could lock up that first spot in the Western Conference. All right, big game, big week. Hope everybody enjoys it as we crawl through it. For Mr. Kevin Baxter, who is away and traveling, I am Josh Patrick Guesman. You've been listening. You've been watching to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye.